Time doesn't just stop in the heat of battle, it shatters. What feels like an age might be a single bloody hour. This is the visceral truth of command, where every decision is measured in blood and breath, and the line between triumph and oblivion is drawn by the courage of men holding a stone wall. We are transported to the smoke-choked crest of Cemetery Ridge on July 3, 1863, to stand beside a Union general as he bears witness to the closing act of the Battle of Gettysburg, the infamous Pickett's charge. Through his eyes, we experience not the sterile strategy of a map, but the deafening roar, the choking dust, and the profound weight of leadership in the face of a legendary infantry assault. This is the story of the few who stood against the many, a pivotal moment in history captured in a first-hand account of unparalleled intensity. It might well have been an age. In truth, it could have been 1 hour, or perhaps 3, or even 5. The keeping of time in such a situation, however precise it is by the clock, becomes profoundly unreliable for those who are keeping it. Growing weary of witnessing men and horses torn apart, and noting that while some shells struck and exploded amidst us, the majority flew high and burst to our rear, it struck me that a location further ahead might be more secure. Rising to my feet, I moved forward, accompanied by my aide, Lieutenant Haskell. I had taken only a few steps when 3 of Cushing's limber chests exploded simultaneously, hurling their contents in a massive column of thick smoke high into the air, and above the tumult, the enemy's triumphant shouts could be heard as they recognized the outcome of their barrage. Passing the cluster of trees noted as marking this section of our line, we proceeded to the fence where the soldiers were lying flat behind it. Signaling them to make space, I stepped over the wall, approached a small thicket of bushes positioned directly in front of the line, and looked out from there to see if I could discern any movement occurring in that direction. Nothing was visible except the smoke continually pouring from the long row of batteries, and nothing was audible but the unceasing roar of hundreds of cannons, the shrieking of innumerable projectiles as they tore through the air in every direction, and the detonation of shells. These all passed above our heads and typically burst behind us. While standing there and pondering how this entire uproar would conclude, Mitchell, an aide to General Hancock, joined me with a message from Hancock, wishing to know what I believed was the purpose of this tremendous fire. I answered that I considered it the prelude either to a withdrawal or to an attack. After remaining there for some time and observing that the enemy did not lower the elevation of their guns, we walked toward the left, still outside the battle line, the men watching us with curiosity from behind the stone wall as we moved along. As we drew near the left of my division, the line curved slightly forward, beyond which lay the spring mentioned in the description of the terrain. As we approached the marshy area below it, I directed Lieutenant Haskell's attention to a soldier who had clearly left his regiment ahead to fetch water. Several canteens were slung around his neck, and he was crawling back through the damp earth, keeping as low to the ground as he could, plainly apprehensive of the shot and shells screaming over his head. As we came closer, I called out to him, "Take care, my man, you could be struck." At the sound of my voice, he turned his head, still hugging the ground as closely as he could, to look in my direction, and then, as if seized by a sudden notion, got to his feet and walked with purpose back to his regiment, no doubt reasoning within himself that if 2 officers could stand upright, there was minimal peril for a third. Circling around to the left of my line, I was moving behind it, back toward the right, when I observed a soldier crossing the field carrying another, clearly wounded, upon his back. Just as they drew even with us, they came upon a low stone wall, which one was attempting to scale while still burdened with the other. I halted and instructed Haskell to go to their aid, and we then resumed our course. The fire from both sides had by now significantly diminished, and only an occasional shell was arriving from the enemy's artillery. As we made our way toward the right, a staff officer, accompanied by an orderly who was leading my horse, met me with the news that the enemy was advancing in great strength. I quickly mounted and rode to the crest of the hill, where a magnificent yet dreadful spectacle greeted my eyes. The enemy, in an extended gray line, was marching directly toward us, across the undulating terrain in our front, their banners fluttering in the air and serving as guides for their battle line. Ahead of them was a dense skirmish line, which was pushing ours back at a run, Behind this leading line, another became visible, and finally a third, and the entire mass advanced like immense waves of humanity, steadily and implacably. Quickly telling Haskell to ride to General Meade and inform him the enemy was assaulting us in force and that we would require all the support he could dispatch, I ordered the guns of Arnold's battery to be run up to the wall and loaded with double charges of canister, and then rode down my line, warning the men to hold their fire until the first enemy line had crossed the Emmitsburg Road. By this time, bullets were whistling quite thickly along the line, and batteries from other sectors of the field had commenced firing upon the moving multitude before us. The front enemy line reached the Emmitsburg Road, and hurriedly scrambling over the two fences, paused briefly to reform, and then started up the slope. My division had until this moment fired very little, but now from the low stone wall on each side of the angle, every rifle along its length unleashed a most tremendous fire. From my post on the left, I could witness the dreadful aftermath. The mounted officers in the rear were seen to fall before it, and as the following lines advanced and scrambled over the fences, men dropped from the top rails, yet the mass continued to press on right up to our very guns in the stone wall ahead. I observed after all three lines had consolidated that the men on the right of the attacking force were constantly shifting inward to their left, clearly to fill voids created by our fire, and that the right of their line was faltering behind the thicket where I had stood during the cannonade. To our left of this position was a regiment from the division, and eager to assist in the fierce struggle now occurring on the hill to the right, I tried to get this regiment to swing out to the front by a change front forward on the right company, to strike the enemy's line in the flank and sweep up along the front of our position. But in the din and confusion of the battle, it was hard to make my commands understood. Few who are unfamiliar with the strict demands of discipline and of how an effective military organization must be a mechanism that operates at the will of one commander, as fully as a locomotive responds to the will of its engineer. Not in all matters, but in every function the locomotive was designed to obey, can grasp the critical importance of drill and discipline in a crisis such as the one we now confronted. In my urgency to get the regiment to swing out and execute my intention, I spurred my horse in front of it and signaled the left flank to advance. I was abruptly reminded of the foolish posture I had taken when the entire regiment opened fire. I moved to the rear as quickly as I could, glancing to my left to see if I could locate troops there who might be persuaded to carry out my instructions. I saw a unit lying behind a small breastwork I had personally ordered to be constructed the previous day, and driving my spurs into my horse, I rode toward it. Just before I reached the position, to my astonishment, the men began a retreat to the rear, even though there was no fire of any consequence on their front. With some effort, I persuaded the command to return to their breastwork, directed the attention of the officers and men to the great numbers falling back from the assaulting column, which were clearly visible, and then, convinced I could obtain no advantage from that command, I galloped back to my own division and again tried to get its left to swing out. While thus engaged, I felt a sharp impact seemingly behind my left shoulder. I soon started to grow faint from the loss of blood, which was dripping from my left hand. I instructed my aide to turn over command of the division to General Harrow, and accompanied by another staff officer, Captain Francis Wessels of the 106th Pennsylvania. I left the field, the sounds of the combat on the hill still echoing in my ears. So what do you think? Was it sheer tactical genius, or the unbreakable will of the men behind that stone wall that ultimately decided the day? General Gibbon's account forces us to confront the brutal chaos of history, where victory hinged on a handful of moments and the courage of individuals lost to time. But this is just one perspective. We want to hear yours. Did the Confederacy's high command make a catastrophic error, or did it come down to mere inches and luck? Could the Union line have actually broken? Debate your theories in the comments below. We'll be reading every single one. If this glimpse into history left you hungry for more, like and subscribe.